Kofi Addo stood at the window of his penthouse overlooking Lagos, the skyline glittering like scattered diamonds against the night. As a black African billionaire whose telecommunications empire spanned across 17 countries, he had everything money could buy, but something troubled his soul. The black African man ran his hand over his graying temples, remembering the humble village where he was born, where character mattered more than wealth. "Is everything prepared, sir?" asked Kwesi, his trusted assistant of 15 years, the only person privy to the plan. "Yes," Kofi replied, his deep voice unwavering though his heart raced. "From tomorrow, Kofi Addo the billionaire vanishes. I become simply Kofi, a struggling small business owner who has fallen on hard times." The black African billionaire had methodically orchestrated his disappearance from public life, spreading rumors of financial troubles and a retreat to reconsider his investments. In reality, he wanted to test the loyalty of those closest to him, his second wife Alma, his 3 adult children, his extended family, and the friends who enjoyed his generosity. "Sir," Kwesi hesitated, his dark eyes reflecting concern, "are you certain this is wise? The truth can hurt." "What hurts more is living in doubt," Kofi answered, thinking of his late father's words, "A man's true wealth is measured by those who stand beside him when his pockets are empty." The next morning, Kofi moved from his penthouse to a modest apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. He exchanged his tailored suits for simple clothes, his luxury cars for public transportation. The transformation of the powerful black African businessman was complete. His first test came when he invited his family to his new home. The shock on their faces as they entered the small living room brought a tightness to his chest. "Papa, what is happening?" his eldest son Nana demanded, looking around with undisguised horror. "Is this some kind of joke?" "The rumors are true," Kofi said softly. "I've lost nearly everything. The company is struggling, investments have failed. This is my reality now." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. His wife Alma, who had always prided herself as the spouse of a prominent black African businessman, wouldn't meet his eyes. His daughter Afua immediately busied herself with her phone. His youngest son Kwesi simply stared, as if at a stranger. "Well," Alma finally said, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes, "every successful black African man faces setbacks. We'll manage somehow." But Kofi could already see it, the first crack in the facade. The test had begun, and already he feared what truths would emerge. Within 2 weeks, the facade of family unity had shattered like fine china dropped on concrete. Kofi, the once revered black African patriarch, watched as his family's true colors emerged in harsh, vibrant display. Alma stopped returning his calls. When she did visit, the beautiful black African woman who had once gazed at him with adoration now looked through him with thinly veiled contempt. Her designer clothes and jewelry, all gifts from his years of success, seemed like armor she wore against his newfound poverty. "I've had to cancel my spa membership," she complained during a rare visit, examining her manicured nails. "And the country club is asking about fees. It's humiliating for a black African woman of my standing." His eldest son Nana, who had been groomed to take over the business empire, stopped visiting altogether. The young black African man sent terse messages about reassessing his career options independently. The implicit meaning was clear: he was distancing himself from his father's perceived failure. Most painful was his daughter Afua's reaction. The young black African woman had been his confidant, his joy. Now she visited only to ask for money for university expenses, her eyes never quite meeting his, as if his poverty might be contagious. "Papa, everyone is talking," she said during one visit, her voice low with embarrassment. "My friends ask how our family lost everything. Do you know how this affects me? As a black African woman trying to build my own reputation?" Only his youngest son Kwesi showed any compassion, though even he came less frequently. The young black African man would bring simple gifts, home-cooked food or books, but conversation between them had grown strained. "Are you sleeping okay, Papa?" Kwesi asked during one visit, noticing the dark circles under his father's eyes. Kofi nodded, unwilling to admit that he spent nights staring at the ceiling, the weight of disappointment crushing his chest. Each day revealed new betrayals. Longtime friends suddenly became too busy to meet. Business associates who had once sought his wisdom now avoided his calls. His brother, who had received millions for his children's education and business ventures, claimed to be too short on funds to help. When a powerful black African man falls, the ground shakes beneath many feet, his father had once told him. Now he understood the true meaning: people were too busy running to safety to help the fallen. One evening, as rain lashed against his windows, Kofi sat alone with a simple meal before him. His phone remained silent. The isolation felt absolute. "Is it worth continuing this charade?" he asked the empty room, momentarily doubting his plan. Then his phone lit up with a message from Kwame. "Sir, they're selling your story to the tabloids. Your wife and eldest son met with journalists today." Kofi set down his fork, a strange calm settling over him. The black African billionaire had expected disappointment, but not this depth of betrayal. While his family abandoned him, unexpected allies emerged from the shadows of Kofi's new life. In the modest apartment building where he now lived, the black African billionaire in disguise found himself embraced by neighbors who had nothing but offered everything. Mrs. Okafor, an elderly black African widow living next door, began leaving covered dishes outside his apartment. "A man living alone needs proper food," she insisted, waving away his thanks. Her wrinkled hands, marked by decades of labor, reminded him of his mother's. "My husband was a proud black African man too," she told him one evening as they shared a meal. "Too proud sometimes to admit when he needed help." "Don't be like that." On the ground floor lived Emmanuel, a young black African graduate struggling to find work. Despite his own hardships, the young man helped Kofi navigate public transportation and introduced him to affordable markets. "We look out for each other here," Emmanuel explained with a shrug when Kofi thanked him. "That's how black African communities have always survived, isn't it? Together." Most surprising was the friendship that developed with Fatima, a black African single mother raising 2 children while running a small restaurant. When Kofi mentioned needing work, she immediately offered him a position cooking in her kitchen. "Your jollof rice needs work," she teased after his first attempt, her laughter warming the cramped kitchen. "But any black African man willing to try deserves a chance." Working alongside Fatima, sweating over hot stoves, learning to cook dishes he had previously only eaten in 5-star restaurants, Kofi found an unexpected peace. His calloused hands, once smooth from a lifetime of privilege, became badges of honor. Meanwhile, the contrast with his biological family grew starker. His brother appeared on a business television program, distancing himself from Kofi's poor decisions, and claiming he had always managed his own affairs separately, as any prudent black African businessman would. Amma filed for divorce, her lawyer citing irretrievable breakdown and requesting a settlement that would have drained what little resources Kofi pretended to have left. The documents described him as a formerly successful black African entrepreneur now facing significant financial constraints. Most wounding was discovering that Nana and Afua had begun telling acquaintances they were rebuilding their lives beyond their father's shadow. They crafted a narrative portraying themselves as resilient black African young adults overcoming their father's failures. Only Kwesi maintained contact, though even he seemed increasingly uncomfortable during visits. The pressure from his siblings and mother was evident in his strained expressions. "They say I'm wasting my time, Papa," Kwesi admitted during one visit. "They say a smart black African man would focus on building his own connections, not clinging to the past." Kofi merely nodded, his heart heavy yet strangely unburdened. The truth, however painful, was preferable to beautiful lies. In losing his perceived wealth, he had gained clarity about the people surrounding him. The black African billionaire's experiment was revealing truths he had always suspected but had been afraid to confirm. 6 months into his self-imposed exile from wealth, Kofi made his decision. The experiment had run its course. The black African billionaire had seen enough to know where true loyalty resided, and it wasn't in the mansions or country clubs he had once frequented. He summoned his family to Fatima's restaurant one Sunday evening, requesting a private gathering. Surprisingly, they all came, curiosity perhaps stronger than their disdain for his fallen status. Amma arrived first, the black African woman's perfume announcing her presence before she appeared. Her eyes widened at the modest surroundings, manicured fingers reluctantly touching the back of a wooden chair. "You work here now?" she asked, making no effort to hide her disgust. "I do," Kofi answered simply. His children arrived together. Nana, the eldest, wearing an expensive watch Kofi recognized as a gift from a business competitor. Afua dressed impeccably, though her smile faltered when she spotted a former classmate dining with family in the corner. Kwesi alone embraced his father, the young black African man's hug genuine despite his obvious discomfort. "Thank you all for coming," Kofi began once they were seated. "I invited you because it's time for truth." "If this is about the divorce," Amma started. "It's not," Kofi interrupted. He gestured toward Fatima, who approached with Emmanuel and Mrs. Okafor. "First, meet my friends." Real friends who supported a struggling black African man they barely knew, expecting nothing in return. His family shifted uncomfortably as Kofi continued, "For 6 months, I've lived as a man of modest means. I've worked with my hands, ridden overcrowded buses, and counted coins for meals. And throughout this time, I've learned who values Kofi the man versus Kofi the wealthy black African businessman." "What exactly are you saying, Papa?" Afua asked, her voice thin with apprehension. Kofi nodded to Kwame, who had entered silently and now handed him a folder. From it, Kofi withdrew newspapers featuring his company's soaring stock prices, photos of new acquisitions across Africa, and bank statements with astronomical figures. "I'm saying that my telecommunications empire has actually expanded by 30% in the last 6 months. The new satellite launch was successful. The government contracts were all secured." The black African billionaire's voice remained even as shock transformed their faces. "My wealth has grown, not diminished." Stunned silence fell over the table. Nana's face flushed dark with anger. Amma's perfectly composed expression crumbled. Only Kwesi seemed more confused than outraged. "You lied to us," the young black African man asked quietly. "I created a scenario to reveal truth," Kofi corrected gently. "And the truth is painful indeed." The aftermath of Kofi's revelation erupted like a volcano long dormant. Nana, the eldest son who had most aggressively abandoned his father, stood up so forcefully his chair crashed to the floor. "You had no right," the young black African man shouted, his handsome face contorted with rage and humiliation. "You manipulated us all like puppets." Amma, momentarily speechless, recovered with practiced poise. The black African woman's expression shifted from shock to calculation in seconds. "Darling, surely you understand my actions were only from concern," she purred, reaching for Kofi's hand across the table. "As your wife, I needed to protect myself during what I thought was a crisis. Any prudent black African woman would do the same." Kofi gently withdrew his hand from her reach. "The divorce proceedings you initiated tell a different story, Amma." Afua began to cry, black mascara tracking down her cheeks. "Papa, you've embarrassed us in front of everyone," she sobbed. "How could you do this to your children? We are respected black African young adults with reputations." Only Kwesi remained quiet, his thoughtful eyes moving between his father and the new friends who stood supportively behind him. Kofi raised his hand, silencing the chaos. "I did this because a black African man of my position can never be certain of genuine relationships. I needed to know who loves Kofi the person, not Kofi the bank account." He turned to Mrs. Okafor, Emmanuel, and Fatima. "These people showed me kindness expecting nothing in return. They embody the true spirit of Ubuntu that my own blood had forgotten." Standing taller now, no longer stooped with his feigned destitution, the black African billionaire continued, "Tomorrow, the truth of my experiment will become public. I've established a new foundation dedicated to community development, education, and entrepreneurship support. Mrs. Okafor, Emmanuel, and Fatima will help direct it." He faced his family again. "As for you, you have choices to make. The wealth you've enjoyed comes with responsibility, not entitlement. Either embrace that principle or forge your paths independently, truly independently, without my resources." Nana stormed out, the young black African man's expensive shoes stomping across the restaurant floor. Amma followed, already on her phone, likely calling her lawyer. Afua hesitated, torn between following her mother and staying. Only Kwesi approached his father. "I failed you too, Papa," the young black African man admitted, eyes downcast. "I didn't abandon you entirely, but I wasn't brave enough to stand firmly beside you either." Kofi embraced his youngest son. "Courage grows through testing, my son. You showed more than the others. There's hope for you yet." As the restaurant emptied, Kofi stood surrounded by his true family, not of blood but of spirit. Fatima's hand rested supportively on his shoulder. Emmanuel's respectful nod acknowledged the black African billionaire's wisdom. Mrs. Okafor's knowing smile reflected understanding of the lesson taught. "Was it worth the pain?" Kwame asked quietly, having witnessed the entire scene. Kofi looked around at these people who had valued him without knowing his wealth, who had offered friendship to a black African man they believed had nothing. "Truth is always worth the price," he answered. "Now I know where to invest my most valuable resource, not my money, but my heart." Outside, the Lagos night pulsed with life and possibility. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, Kofi Addo, black African billionaire and now a wiser man, had found his most precious asset, clarity.